All right, good evening, everyone. My name's Julie Wood. I'm the Climate Resilience Director at Charles River Watershed Association. Thank you so much for joining us on this early summer evening to talk about climate change and how we can prepare for it. We're titling our presentation tonight, Solutions for Future Flooding in the Charles River Watershed. So we are gonna focus on solutions and having some hope as we adapt to climate change. And the real point of this meeting is to get input from you all on the ideas we're presenting. A few housekeeping items before we start. The first item, we are offering translation into Spanish this evening. If that is of interest to you, you can follow the instructions on the screen. I'll just quickly walk through them. If you're on your phone, the icon on the bottom right with the 3 dots, More, you're going to hit that, select language interpretation, and then English or Spanish. If you're on your computer, you're going to look on your menu for the interpretation icon, looks like a little globe, select that, and select your language of choice. Carolina, do you want to provide those instructions briefly in Spanish?
Sure. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Carolina Pérez, yo soy la intérprete de español en esta reunión. De la manera que usted puede unirse a esta reunión con el canal de interpretación, si usted está utilizando su computadora, en la parte de abajo puede ver el globo y el globito, presione ahí, luego seleccione su lenguaje preferido, que sería español o inglés, y luego presiona donde dice Done. Ahora, si usted está uniéndose con su teléfono inteligente, también presione donde dice más en los 3 puntitos, luego ve interpretación, presione donde dice interpretación, presione la lengua preferida que prefiere escuchar y luego presione Done. Listo.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we will go ahead and open the interpretation channel now. And please use the chat if you have any issues, or feel free to raise your hand. We have a meeting format tonight. This is intended to be a meeting where we hear from you. All right. Tonight's agenda. So we have about 15 minutes of background and introduction just to get everybody on the same page. And then we're going to move into breakout rooms. So if you're interested in the Dedham Barnes Memorial Park project or a impact area, a sub-watershed that we have in Dedham and West Roxbury, you're going to stay here in the main room. If you are interested in our project in Needham, you are going to go into a breakout room. So we'll all be together for the introductions and then go into breakout rooms to talk about the individual projects. If you're interested in all of them, you can certainly watch the recording of the other one you don't attend. We will post it. A little bit about Charles River Watershed Association. Hopefully you've heard of us, but maybe you haven't. Our mission is to protect, restore, and enhance the Charles River and its watershed through science, advocacy, and the law. This project is a great example of how we do that with a great mix of science and advocacy and policy. At Charles River Watershed Association, we take a watershed scale view. You'll also really see that in action tonight. So the Charles River is 80 miles long. A lot of people think it's just that downstream area in Boston and Cambridge. I'm guessing most of not you folks though, since you live in the middle and upper watershed. 80 miles from Hopkinton to Boston, 35 towns in the watershed, and the watershed is the river's basin or drainage area. So all the rain that falls across that area, 300 square miles, is going to end up in the river. Approximately 1 million residents, so very densely populated. More than 60% of those residents live in environmental justice neighborhoods. We also like to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Charles River watershed resides on the occupied territory of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, and Wampanoag tribes. At Charles River watershed, we acknowledge that a land acknowledgement is not enough, and we continue to learn, grow, and listen to Native voices as we advocate for a resilient future. A little background on the initiative that we're going to be talking about tonight. Starting back in 2021, working as a team with Weston and Sampson, communities responding to extreme weather, and the Charles River Climate Compact, which is a voluntary partnership of cities and towns in the watershed. We all got together and obtained some funding from the state's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, to develop what we call the Charles River Flood Model, or CRFM for short. This is a computer model that simulates how water moves across the watershed. We can use this computer model to show the impacts of various storm events. So we can look at present day storm events and future storm events and see where it's going to flood and how deep that flooding will be. We use that model not only to understand the impacts of future flooding, but also to understand possible solutions. And like I said, that's where we're going to spend our time tonight. There's 3 different areas that I already previewed in the agenda. This impact area along the main stem of the Charles between Dedham and Boston, the Barnes Memorial Park in Dedham, and an area around Adler Brook and the Needham Public Works building in Needham. 2 of these are, so 2 of these are single sites, or slightly larger than single sites, but essentially one site, whereas one is a larger area. So I'm just going to provide some background on how these were chosen and why, and then we'll get into the fun stuff, which is looking at the potential designs. So these priority sites that we're talking about, how did we come up with these, and how did they become priorities? So as I mentioned, this project has been going on for a few years. Last year, we solicited public input and developed a scoring methodology, a fairly robust methodology for comparing sites. We updated a bit this year to make it a little more simplistic, a little easier to use, and a little easier to communicate about. Then we had to get ideas to actually score. So we put a call out to our partners in the Charles River Climate Compact, and those are municipal staff in the cities and towns that are partnering on this project. We also put a call out to the public. Anytime we do a public survey, we're always looking for ideas. If there are ideas generating in the community, we're always looking for those. Even if you have those tonight, we'd love to hear about them even though we're, not doing this exact work right now. We collect a bunch of ideas, we use that methodology to score them, and then we select which ones become the priority. So what kind of things are we looking for when we're scoring them? Site feasibility and permitting feasibility. How likely is it that we would be able to build something there? We're also looking for community support. Again, that's why we love when these ideas are generated directly by the community. We're looking for potential flood reduction impacts. Is this a site that has the potential to really help downstream flooding? And then finally, we're looking for sites that might offer benefits that align with community values as well as our project values. And those are things like creating new habitat, improving the health of habitat, creating recreational opportunities, and providing other co-benefits for community members, and protecting environmental justice communities. So as I already previewed, we picked 2 for this year. I want to just give a shout out thanks to the Dedham Parks and Recreation Committee, who already provided wonderful input on the Bonds Memorial Park project, which is incorporated into what you'll see tonight. I also just want to pause here and mention that since this is an ongoing initiative, we have had multiple past sites go through this process, and many of those have gone on to obtain additional funding for additional design and hopefully soon construction. You may have noticed one of the sites was a lot bigger. So these are what we call our impact areas. These are essentially mini drainage basins, mini watersheds. The model divides the full study area up into 300 little pieces of drainage, so 300 catchments. And then says here right on the slide what we're looking for in prioritizing those. For these ones, we are looking for ones that might have cross-jurisdictional impact. So maybe it includes 2 cities, 2 towns, like the one we're talking about tonight. Maybe it's right on the border and can prevent some downstream flooding. Is there current flood damage in the area? Is there projected flooding of critical facilities in the area or current flooding of critical facilities in the area? Is there potential for flood improvements, just like we're looking for with the site designs? And are there environmental justice areas that we can look to potentially invest some public investment in protecting those areas? All right, so that's the background. Tonight, we're going to present you for each of these sites, with some concept design. So that might be a very familiar term to some of you. It may be a new term to others. What is a concept design? It's an idea that it's my dog. A design that gives you the general idea of what might be constructed there. So it's not an engineering design with all the details of how deep something needs to be, what things need to be made of. It's a very general idea of what would and could happen at a site. It's a great time to get feedback because it's enough information to solicit input and not far enough along that you can't take in a lot of feedback and a lot of changes. So what do concept designs take into account? They take into account the project's goals, basic site information, and community needs and desires, which we'd want to hear from you tonight. What do they not consider? No precise technical details of the site. We have not done soil tests. We have not done surveys, elevation surveys, precise system designs, potential ADA requirements, full coordination with all city and town departments, and maintenance needs and plans. None of those have been done at this point. That would happen in a further stage. So when you see these, what do we want to hear? Basically, what do you like? What do you not like? What do you want changed? And then any other comments and suggestion you would have, we will take into account. Now, if after the meeting you think of something else you wish you would have said, or if you are watching this meeting as a recording and you're not going to be able to join the discussion, please visit crwa.org. Under our work, click Climate Resilience. If you prefer to view our website in another language, in a language other than English, you can always change it over here. When you get to our climate resilience page, click on Charles River Flood Model. On that website, we have a section dedicated to feedback. So it says right there, we want to hear from you. And you'll find this survey. You can drop down, select from the drop-down menu the site you want to comment on, and then tell us anything you forgot to tell us. So next steps. All the feedback we hear tonight, we'll take it in, we'll incorporate it into the designs as much as possible. We then run these designs through our Charles River flood model and see the actual numeric benefit of the flood reduction that these projects could potentially provide. And we are inviting all of you to join us again on June 12th, another online evening Zoom meeting where you can come back and hear all of the final results of the project. So we'll have the final designs and those numeric flood benefits out of the model for you. We'll have some additional modeling that we have done at the full watershed scale. That's really interesting. I encourage you all to come for that. And we'll also have one of our partners, Hartman Dietz, an activist and member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, talking about flooding from an Indigenous perspective. So please register for that and come back and see all the results of your input tonight. All right, so with that, we are going to break into the breakout rooms. Before we do that, though, we will have the full team introduce themselves. All right, actually, Dira, do you want to, I know your picture isn't on here, but do you want to start and then we'll kick it to our partners at Weston and Sampson?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dira Johanoff. I'm the Senior Climate Resilience Associate at CRWA. I'll pass it off to Jenny.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Janet Moonen, or Jenny Moonen. I'm a Senior Project Manager at Weston and Sampson and working on climate resilience flood mitigation projects throughout New England with this team. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Indrani Ghosh. I'm a senior technical leader with Weston and Sampson, also working on a number of climate resiliency projects throughout the region. Very happy to be here. Doris.
Hello, my name is Doris Jenkins. I'm a project engineer on this team working on the flood resiliency solutions.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Simpson. I am the lead green infrastructure designer for the team, and I've been working on climate resilience projects also across the region. So happy to be here tonight.
Excellent. All right, so right on time, 6:50. If you forgot where you were supposed to go, we have this handy guide for you. So if you're interested in the Dedham or Boston project, just stay put. If you are interested in the Needham project, select the breakout room. All right, excellent. It looks like folks are moving in.
Julie, just confirming the breakout room option is under more. Okay, got it.
Okay, yep. Okay, I'm not seeing much movement anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and take my screen share down. Is anyone in the main room that was actually hoping to move to the breakout room?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I was.
Tom?
Yes.
Tom, okay. Dira, can we, oh, sorry, she already went in I can move you, I think.
I would also like to be moved.
Heather?
And
Yep.
I would as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, breakout rooms. Heather. Tom, Bob?
Yeah.
And
Right.
Tom.
Yeah, I was looking for Needham also.
Okay.
Join breakout room. Terrific.
All right. All right. Anyone else? Okay. All right, great. Thanks for bearing with us. All right. Okay, excellent. I will hand it over to the team at Weston and Sampson.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'll do a quick intro again. Just once again, I'm Alex Simpson from Weston and Sampson, and I'm here to talk to you about the Dedham and the Dedham Boston impact areas. I see a couple familiar names on here. So hi, Joe. Nice to see you. So we'll get started with the Barnes Memorial Site. So this is our priority site assessment, as Julie had talked about before. And so just a little context, the Barnes Memorial Park, it's a town-owned and maintained recreational site. You can see here we have a kind of a locus map of Dedham, and then this is a blow-up of that spot. So this is the Barnes Memorial Park, and then we have the street here, and then, this is the parking to access the site. And then it's a town-owned and maintained recreational site, and we've done extensive modeling. And so based on that modeling, during the 10-year, 24-hour storm, for the 2070 climate scenario, we will be experiencing, increased flood depths. And through this site here, you can see these different cells that are showing the different anticipated depths of that flooding. So just so you can see the legend here, the darkest blue is the deeper flooding. So we can see within the park right here, we're going to see some extensive flooding in the 3-foot range here and here. Just as a site description, this is a well-loved, well-used recreational park site. We have kind of an informal parking lot without any parking lines where people can go in, access the site. We have 2 formal playing fields, and then we have, green space up on the north, and then we do have another field back here, and there is a playground where, very well-loved park, lots of people are using it, and then we have the concession stand here. So now that we have the context of the site, if you're not familiar with it, we're going to go through the different concepts we looked at to reduce some of that anticipated flooding. And so these are the green infrastructure solutions that we've been looking through that Julie touched on earlier. And so I'm going to start by walking through kind of everything we're looking at. And then as we go through the presentation, we'll talk through kind of the specific different concepts, and we'll have those numbered and we'll talk through those. But I just want to touch on everything first, and then I'll go through each one. And then at the end, if we have any questions, we can talk about that. Also, feel free to raise your hand and pop in if you do have a question. I'm happy to explain anything as we go along. So, first up, so this is the site. As I said, here's our street. This is our water body right here. And then here's the parking lot. And so we're looking at expanding the parking, which would be an impervious solution, but we're looking at, how can we treat that impervious? Then we're looking at bioretention basin. We're looking at stream overflow storage, wetland restoration up here, renaturalization. We're looking at increasing the tree canopy, which is very important for urban heat island effect. We're doing that in multiple places across the site. And as Julie said, these aren't final placements. So, if you want more trees, don't worry. We definitely would be looking at that. And then we're also looking at an access path to, increase circulation through the park and allow people to access parts of the park that aren't currently accessible to them. And then finally, looking at a bioretention basin or a demonstration pollinator garden down at the south near the additional parking on the road. So now that we've kind of gone through everything that we looked at on the site, now we're going to look at just kind of blow-ups of each one. And so concept 1A is a wetland restoration. And so you can see this blow up here. This is the culvert. And then this is kind of the water along the edge. You can see kind of the edge of the wetland here. And then this arrow just kind of points up here so you can see kind of where in the site we're looking at. And so what we're looking at here with the wetland restoration is we're looking at wetlands already exist within kind of the Commonwealth and everywhere, and they're great at reducing and mitigating flooding events. And so how can we expand that and try to restore that and make it a wider part of the site. So we have more storage to accommodate those floodwaters, and adding, increasing the habitat and increasing just the wetland storage available. And then concept 1B is looking at stream overflow storage. So we've done this in other municipalities where you have your water body right here. And then during these high flow events that we are anticipating, you have bypass storage. So during normal flow or low flow events, you're not going to be affecting the flow of the water. But during these higher intensity, more volume events, there is an alternative pathway for this water to go. Instead of just inundating the fields and making them unplayable, we're giving them additional space. So they have more space to go without affecting the users. And so, looking at the site here, we have room here without affecting the playing field. So that's what another option that we think would be a great opportunity to implement. For concept 2, we're looking at renaturalizing the space. So in the northern part of the park, we have this wide open swath right here. And currently it's used as an access path from a higher point in the town up here. But other than that, this is kind of an unprescribed space that is currently not being maximized. So we're looking at how can we renaturalize this, increase the tree canopy, because trees are really important because, they uptake more water and they can provide more habitat and also reduce the urban heat island. So renaturalizing this. And here's a kind of concept sketch down here, what a renaturalization could look like. So it's not just trees. We're adding different topography features. We're increasing the amount of storage, the different options there. So there's just a lot of different surface treatments that can be done in a renaturalization scenario. And so programming this area to be more effective at mitigating the anticipated flooding is what we're looking at doing here without affecting the current recreational space. Concept 3 would be looking at the bump out. So this is at the southern point of the site. So right now, this is existing conditions. We have a catch basin. It's kind of at the low point of the road, and then it bumps out here. And, there's room between here and an existing utility pole. That would be a great opportunity to remove some of that impervious pavement and actually give it a pervious treatment, which a bioretention bump out could do, to capture that storm water and actually infiltrate it into the ground and add additional habitat by adding plantings and additional water uptake with those plantings. So just you can have a beautiful garden right next to your roadway while also increasing the amount of stormwater storage available. So that's what we would like to do here. And then concept 4 is expanding the parking. So, we've been talking about these different, pervious solutions, and this isn't a solution, but this is something that will improve the accessibility and the use of the park. And that's something we don't want to discount, and it's something we want to look into. But you do have the opportunity when you're looking at increasing the impervious area of a site of how can you mitigate it and actually leave it better than you started with. And one way to do that is with a rain garden or different mitigation strategies that just collect that stormwater that you're additionally generating and then infiltrating it and reducing the amount that goes back into the system. And so here in the existing parking lot, they already have a system that is working great and that the town really likes. So we'd be looking at replicating that system, further down based on the increase to try to even reduce the amount of runoff that's coming off even from the existing pavement by doing this as well. And then, so we don't have another slide about the tree canopy, but I do want to talk about that. So the tree canopy, we're showing a tree here and here at this access path, but really, this could be as much or as little as the town desires or in getting resident feedback, because there are lots of uses at this site. So, we got feedback when we went before the Parks Commission that having trees up here could affect how they get different things for different town holidays. And I forget the event, but they have an event where they have things come through here. So being aware of these multi-uses and not affecting that while also increasing the canopy is something really important when we're looking at this, is looking at the co-benefits, but also not impacting the current use. So, we took a look at that. So adding trees here, adding trees down here, there's even an opportunity to maybe add some more here, but this would be further expanded upon as we go through the design process. And then lastly, looking at the access path. So this material is not called out. We don't know what would be the best use here. You have to look at a couple different things. You know, we always want an impervious surface to use here, but that's not always the most durable and it's not always the most accessible. So we'd be looking at balancing a lot of different things, but looking at what's the best for the town, but also, you know, has that additional circulation benefit. So everyone can experience and access this beautiful park with all the additional amenities. So that kind of covers everything we wanted to go through, but now we'd love to get everyone's feedback and get any comments or concerns or any questions I could help explain.
Feel free to raise a hand or even just unmute yourself.
Elizabeth, you look ready.
I am ready.
Excellent.
And this is just like a question that is like coming out of left field, so to speak. Louder Brook is, I believe, attached to Wigham Pond.
Okay.
And the town's looking at Wigham Pond, but Wigham Pond's not my concern. I think there's a body of water a little further up from Wigham Pond, and I don't know if it drains into Wigham Pond, but that area is contaminated. So have we looked at the contamination there and the amount of peat that probably sits under Barnes Memorial?
That's a great point, but unfortunately, as part of this project, we weren't necessarily looking at, you know, the soils or the subsurface conditions of, you know, the contributing water bodies. I think when we are looking at the Barnes Memorial site specifically, we're looking at what can we do within the confines of the park to reduce the flooding at the park. So we weren't looking at adjacent parcels. We weren't looking at some of those upland or downland water bodies and what they could be contributing. We're looking at how can we, you know, directly at the site affect the flooding here. But, you know, those are great points, and definitely as you get further in design are definitely design considerations. So it's great to have that feedback now. So thank you.
And we had a question in the chat, where does the Charles feed into this area? Which I think we're sort of just touching on that blue line there in your slide, Alex. That's the Louder Brook, which is a tributary to the main stem of the Charles. So that flows into the Charles.
Thanks, Julie.
And just another note on feedback or questions. You know, not at all needing any technical expertise to share your thoughts with us. You are the experts just by having knowledge of the park and the community. So,
absolutely, Julie. And I think that's a great point. Just you guys live here, you guys recreate here, you know what the needs are of this park. So even if it, you know, Elizabeth's saying it's out of left field, I don't think it is at all. I think it's all super important context for us as we're going through this because, you know, we're not using this as often as you are. I do think you're muted if you wanted to add more.
Actually, I do just a little bit more. And sorry, my dog's barking in the background here.
No worries.
I think this is an absolutely fabulous starting place. It's central to town. It's not sitting like directly in the neighborhood. You really don't have a whole lot of people who are going to come out and go, oh. So I think this is really, really a perfect area to start. You know, I live in Riverdale, so I would have been happier if it started on the Charles, but from a townwide point of view, this is a great area to start. Just my opinion, not coming out of left field.
Thank you, appreciate it. Does anyone else have anything else? Even from a recreational aspect, you know, if you just wanted to speak to how you use the site, we're always happy to hear that. When we went before parks, you know, they gave us some great feedback. We were looking at some things that would interfere with how they were using the site right now that we had no idea about, right, Julie? It just where the kids are warming up or where they're storing the equipment. That's it's all great information. So if there's anything else you'd like to chime in on, we'd love to hear it.
I am also going to put that online feedback page in the chat. And you are welcome to use that right now as well. Don't have to wait until after the meeting.
Great. Linda, I see that you're unmuted. We can't hear you if you were trying to add anything. Okay, well, we don't have to sit on this. I can move on to the next one, Julie, unless anyone else has anything else. Allie?
I had one, yeah, sorry, I had one quick question. I'm not familiar with the site, so I don't have much valuable input here, but I did have a question. As you were showing the image of the flood model, it looked like there was quite a bit of flooding anticipated south of the fields in the neighborhood, I assume, neighborhood area. And so I was just wondering if the design is incorporating or is aiming to infiltrate some of that flooding as well through the channel restoration, or if that's a different project entirely.
So I think as part of this specific project, like I said, we're looking at just the impacts on the field, but, those downstream impacts are typically inherent to any type of project. So, further modeling would be required to see what the actual impact would be. But typically, every water goes everywhere. Jenny, you look like you want to add something.
Yeah, I was going to say, Allie, that upstream area is actually sort of a wetland system. It does encroach into the neighborhoods, but if you look on it in aerials, that's all, there is quite a bit of natural area there. We did look at whether we could expand this project north. Unfortunately, there's really no large municipally owned parcels. It's a lot of commercial area abutting it. So it's really a separate project from our perspective. And there's also culvert considerations that would need to be a piece of the puzzle under Eastern Ave. So that's the answer we have.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and just to add on, we did look over here, and this is all private, so that kind of limits some of what we can look at. Yes, Frank?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. Yeah, very interesting. I'm pretty familiar with the site, having walked by Fairbanks and kind of along there. So it's a very worthwhile endeavor. My question is perhaps more general. When you all, Weston and Sampson and Charles River, are looking at potential sites, do you have a list of sort of standard metrics that you can evaluate? In other words, square feet of wetlands restored or flooding risk reduced? Like, what are the 4 or 5 sort of variables that help compare one site to another?
Excellent question. And I'll just put another plug in for our June 12th event, because we'll go through the whole overall project there. As part of the whole overall project, we did set some flood impact goals and metrics. Because, and I think it kind of came up with what Jenny was just saying, we're not really talking about flooding. We're talking about flood impacts and flood damage. So when flood waters infringe on our infrastructure, that's where we run into problems. A flooded natural wetland is generally not an issue. That's, what they're built to do. So we have 3 goals for our flooding. And then each goal has either 1 or 2 metrics that we use to assess basically every solution we come up with. So goal number 1 is the overall goal, looking at if flooding in the future design storm is getting worse than today's version of that current storm. So perhaps some of you have heard this language before, but a 10-year design storm, a storm with a 10% chance of happening in any year, is however many inches, 8 inches or whatever it is right now, might be, 9, 10 inches in 2070. We do have actual numbers. I just don't have them up here. So we run the model for the 10-year design storm today, run the model for the 2070 design storm. Did flooding get any worse? So that's metric number one. And for that, or that's goal number one. And for that, we look at the depth of flooding and the extent of flooding. So essentially, if you say, essentially it's saying, well, can we mitigate that delta caused by climate change? Number two goal for this project is, can we prevent flooding in environmental justice neighborhoods? So areas where our most vulnerable residents are living, least likely to be able to self-adapt, potentially least likely to be able to relocate. Can we use public investment to prevent flooding there? So goal is prevent flooding in EJ, and then obviously the metric is, does the project or doesn't it? And then the third one is protecting critical infrastructure. So same thing, was the solution able to protect critical infrastructure, either locally, right in the general vicinity, or, for the larger scales at a broad scale.
I got a follow-up if you are inclined to take it.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So in the assessment that you described, does the square footage of the 10-year risk area make a difference relative to, like appraised value of property? Critical infrastructure obviously has a different kind of cost benefit assessment than would a baseball field, just to choose that. So I'm mostly going from the city of Boston experience, trying to evaluate how the city decides what to protect with what level of priority. Clearly critical infrastructure is at the top, but it's just interesting to see the trade-offs that have to be made when evaluating different projects and sort of where the really meaningful distinctions are, as opposed to more subjective policy type. But that's more of a statement, I guess, than a question, but thanks for giving me the forum.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I did lead us off with saying we're going to be positive and hopeful and talk about solutions. But yeah, that's the tough part, to really think about, that the flood impacts are coming. But at the same time, can we make investments that prepare for those that also make our community better? But yeah, it's tough. There's certainly some areas that are going to be flooded on a regular basis, and Boston, of course, is right at the forefront of that. We had one more question in the chat, and then we'll move on. Linda said she's heard that willow trees have good water uptake. So are willow trees a good solution?
So our team has landscape architects that help with deciding on plantings. I have also heard that willow trees are a great uptake, but you need to balance where you put them on the site with how wet they're going to be and how often they're going to be wet. So I can't give a great answer on if willow trees would be exactly the best option for where we have proposed trees on this site. We would need to consider that further in our design and future phases.
Thank you. All right. So if you think of other stuff, we're going to have another discussion after we go through the impact area. So you can still talk about the barn site then, but we will move on to our impact area.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Julie. And once again, if you guys have questions as I'm going through, please raise your hand or just unmute and ask. Don't worry about it. We'd love to hear your feedback as we're going through. So feel free. So next I'm going to talk about the Dedham and Boston priority impact area. So this is the lower watershed impact area. This is located in Dedham and Boston, specifically West Roxbury. So this black outline here, this is our watershed outline. You can see the town line here with this dashed line. So Dedham is on the left, Boston is on the right. And, this is a blow up of this area right here. So just so everyone has the context of kind of where we're at within kind of the broader Charles River, and then also just the watershed. So we just want to highlight, in terms of the impervious surfaces, for this catchment area, we're looking at, you know, almost 1,100 acres. And in terms of impervious area, we're looking at 588 acres, which is 54% impervious. So over half of the land use in this catchment is impervious. And, you know, we've been talking about this a lot, just impervious versus pervious. So that just means, you know, over half of the area, the water hits the ground and it does not go back in, which is not great. And then we have our color coded here, so you can see just the imperviousness of an area. And then next we're looking at the FEMA flood hazard zones. So this is the FEMA overlay with our catchment area. So once again, Dedham, Boston. And so the blue is the AE area, which is the 100-year floodplain event. And then the orange is the 500-year is what we typically use. But, you know, for this, it's the 1% and the 0.2, but just so you know, it's the 100-year and the 500-year. And so you can see this expands quite a bit into this area. So there's a lot of area within this catchment that's going to be in the 100 and the 500-year floodplain. And then, as we talked about before, with the modeling that we've been doing, so the projected flooding from the 2070 10-year storm, that's going to be approximately 7.1 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, which is a lot of rain. And we just talked about how, you know, over half of the area in this catchment is impervious. So it's not going into the ground in over half of this catchment. So then through that, you know, looking at these different little polygons with the depths, you can see that up here it's pretty deep, and then as we go this way, you know, it's not as bad down here, but you know, we still are looking at increased flooding during this 2070 10-year storm event. And so now, you know, we looked at different solutions, and this is just, we were looking at maximum extent, so looking at what are the options within this watershed. So we explored bioretention with tree trenches, depaving / renaturalization, what we had talked about previously. We're looking at porous pavement, subsurface storage, tree box filters, invasive management, and stream restoration. And so approximately 9 acres of potential solutions were explored. And you can see on this map here, we have this entire catchment, we have the town lines, but you can see the different types of green infrastructure opportunities that we were looking at in these different parcels. So just you can see, so like the pink here, it looks like there's some here. And yeah, I know this is probably kind of hard to see, but we are going to go through the blow-ups through these next slides. So don't worry, this isn't your only exposure. Yeah,
I wanted to note to everyone, this is not the most amount of flood mitigation you could do in this subcatchment. We focus on the sort of largest opportunities and the best bang for your buck. There's a lot of residential neighborhoods that have roadways, which can be very challenging to install meaningful amounts of flood storage just due to limitations with utilities, parking, etc. So this isn't everything you could do, but this is a pass where we're looking at sort of the best and biggest options to put some context to the scale of this.
Yeah, no, that's great, Jenny. So thank you for bringing that up. Just, you can do green infrastructure almost anywhere. And so if you're looking locally, you know, there's other opportunities, but we, like Jenny said, we're looking at these bigger opportunities to have bigger impact. So don't worry, if you don't see something you think would be great here, it doesn't mean it isn't an option. And so now we're going to go through some of these proposed opportunities that we were looking at. So we're going to start up here in this area. So we were just looking at installing bioretention basins and increasing the subsurface storage at Billings Field, and installing porous pavement at the intersection of Center Street and Mount Vernon Street. So when we say, you know, a subsurface infiltration chamber, this is just one example. There are lots of different products out there. So this is a arch chamber, but there are, you know, square options, and there's more shallow options that can make a system deeper, or shallower can make it have, you know, more storm storage within it or less. There's a lot of options, but we're just showing one of those options. And then same with porous pavement. You know, this can look a couple different ways. There's porous asphalt, there's permeable pavers. You know, it could be different types of solutions here, but this is kind of what we were talking about. Next, we moved down. So we were looking at potentially creating subsurface storage under the St. Teresa School parking lot and installing bioretention and existing green spaces. So when we have these green spaces, this is a great opportunity for us to retrofit those and add an additional stormwater component. You know, if you see a loam strip and it could have storage underneath it, or it could have plantings, it doesn't just need to be grass. And so we were looking at different areas where we could retrofit existing green spaces with these type of solutions. So this is an example of a project that we've installed in the city of Lynn, where we took a existing grass area and we actually added a swale that serves as a stormwater feature on the site. And then more subsurface chambers.
One of the great benefits too of the subsurface chambers is they can really hold a significant amount of water without impacting the use, right? You can still park on them, you can still play on top of them. You see them in a lot of commercial developments in the country. So that's one, and you can tie green practices into them so that they can be both kind of a gray-green combination.
Definitely. And actually this project here, these two systems are actually part of the same system. So these chambers tie into the same system as this bioretention area here, which is actually connected to a porous asphalt treatment right here. And so they all play together to increase the amount of flood storage that we can have in a more limited site. So next, we looked at installing subsurface storage underneath the impervious lot and installing bioretention basins in the right-of-way. So you can see here at this little Google screenshot, this is a large impervious area. There's a lot of parking. So there's the opportunity here to, like Jenny said, install these subsurface systems where we're not affecting the use. So, you know, this development, they probably need all this parking. We can see how many cars there are. So we don't want to take away that use, but we do want to improve the amount of water we can hold on site so we can reduce some of that flooding during these events. And then the street side bioretention, you know, you're looking at improved pedestrian safety. You're looking at improved urban heat island effect. You're looking at just improved aesthetics, improved biodiversity, just by nature of having more green space, more planted area, more pervious systems going in where, you know, existing, you only have that asphalt or that impervious surface. So, you know, you can do different kinds of configurations in projects like this, but, you know, it's good to note that just because you see this sea of pavement doesn't mean there can't be stormwater management going on underneath. So next thing here, installing bioretention in the green space behind the Veterans Memorial Hospital parking lot. We've heard that they could be very open to this type of treatment. So you can see that this parking space is well used. So, but there's also all this green space back here. And not every green space needs to become a bioretention area, but when you have this much pavement, adding those additional treatment practices can have a huge impact on reducing that runoff that's, you know, ending up in the Charles, ending up in residents' basements or backyards. So capturing that closer to these runoff points, and like I said, having all those increased pedestrian and urban heat highland effects are all just kind of like an added bonus to these flood mitigation measures. So now we're moving to the Dedham side. So we're at this project site, we're looking at increasing the subsurface storage under the playing field and parking lots, installing bioretention in the green space, and making the courts, playscapes pervious at the Riverdale Elementary School. So we have these play spaces and we don't want to take that away from kids, but how can we change the different type of treatments that are being put down for these spaces that kids are using to help reduce some of that impervious area, allow that water to infiltrate back in, and you know, reduce some of that runoff. And so that's what we're looking at here. So playgrounds. There's all different new products that are coming out. So, there's different opportunities here. And then, bioretention, like we've been saying, can also come in a lot of different forms. We can have, pollinator gardens. We can have all sorts of things. You can put trees in these bioretention areas. There's a lot of different surface treatments that can tie into the existing kind of aesthetic that's going into the ground already. So just to make it a more inviting space that is capturing more stormwater. And so moving on to a different school. So replacing the blacktop and the playscape with pervious surfaces and installing bioretention at the Joyce Kilmer Lower School. So we're back in Boston now. And so, in these school systems, adding these different bioretention and stormwater features can really tie into the education aspect. And that's also something we strive to do with these projects is how can we not only increase the amount of stormwater management that we're having on site, but how can we also educate the public and educate these students to get them excited about green infrastructure and greening our cities and reducing our impacts and, improving water quality for the Charles. So that's just another added component to doing these types of projects adjacent or at schools. And same with subsurface infiltration chambers, doing the subsurface system, you have less opportunity for educational opportunities. But as Jenny said, the quantity of water that can be captured in these systems shouldn't be understated. So having a nice balance of these surface treatments that, students can see and be educated on, while also having these subsurface systems that can be taking in large swaths of water. It's a really nice kind of co-benefit to have both of those on a site where possible. Next, we have installing bioretentions at the cul-de-sac of Oakmere Street. So cul-de-sacs are kind of an interesting point, in a neighborhood. When you look at them, especially on this picture, you can see how much pavement there is, and there is a lot of dead space. So what are our options here? Because, having a turnaround is very important to the functioning of, a cul-de-sac. Like people need to be able to turn around, but how can we green the space up to still provide the service that like the cul-de-sac does, while also adding stormwater features to try to reduce the amount of impervious area that is in this cul-de-sac and improving some of the flood storage there. So you can do a bioretention basin. You have different options. It could be a curb system. It could be a non-curb system. It could be in the middle. It could be outside of here. So there are a lot of options, but just the key point is reducing some of that pavement and then also increasing the amount of storage. So next we're down here. So here we're looking at de-paving and renaturalizing the bottom portion of a private parking lot next to the Charles River, a stream restoration / invasive management in the Charles River as well. So you can see here, this is the river. This is all this parking area. And so we've been talking about this as we go, like when we see this much pavement, we just think about how much water is not going back into the ground. We're thinking about how much is running off directly into the river. And especially in a site like this, where we're this close to the Charles, there's less space for this water to go before it does get in there. So we're looking at water quality issues. We're looking at just less space for us to try to implement some of these different mitigation strategies. So we're looking at, de-paving. So how can we take away some of this parking? We see these cars. Do we think they need all of these spaces? Can we interface with these owners and ask them, do you need all this parking? How can we reallocate some of this space to help you so you have less flooding while also helping the Charles and keeping it healthier so there's less runoff that's going in there? And then also looking at the stream restoration and invasives management. So invasives are a big issue. I'm sure everyone's noticed in their yards this year how much knotweed and everything else is popping up. I know I have. So how can we help on a broader scale, like reduce those invasives, help increase the biodiversity, make our habitat healthier, and also just increase the amount of actual native plants that are being planted in these areas, because that's also just going to help long term with the health. And then next, we're over here now. So we're looking at installing subsurface infiltration chambers or porous pavement at a parking lot on Bridge Street. And so as you know, Jenny had said, we can do these in conjunction with one another. So we're looking at how can we add storage, but also, you know, we don't want to change the surface here. They need parking. Everyone needs parking. So we can make it porous. We can still have that use here while also having that flood mitigation and that stormwater storage in the same footprint without changing it. And those were all of our, that's a very high level. So I know I kind of didn't spend a ton of time on each one, but I'm happy to go back and discuss. Or Jenny, if you have anything to add before.
I wanted to explain too a little bit about what's kind of cool about looking at these priority impact areas or sort of subcatchments. When we've done watershed-wide flood modeling and looked at a variety of solutions that you could employ watershed-wide, like if you across the board reduced impervious cover by 40%, what would it do to flooding now and in the future? And we have those results for every catchment in the watershed. And so what we're doing a little bit with this is kind of an experiment, because we did a theoretical approach, and now when we look at the actual catchment and look at the parcels and look at the uses, and if we were to employ these, how well does it compare to that theoretical approach? And that's results that will be shared with, I believe, at the public meeting, Julie. So that's one of the pieces of this exercise that's really interesting. It's taking theory to practice. Elizabeth, we see your question.
I'm going to ask, we're building a new park in Dedham Square where the police station used to be. Can the catchment be put under there? They haven't started the park yet. 600 High Street.
What was the address? 600
Street? High Street. It's right at the corner of Washington and High where the old police station used to be. It's 14,000 square feet, and we're going to put a little town green there. And it seems like a pretty good place to drop a catchment basin.
Do some storage.
Oh yeah.
Well, sir, I would certainly recommend reaching out to Parks and Public Works and asking about whether they've considered that. I know that Dedham is, overall very proactive in water quality improvements and trying to manage flooding as they do municipal projects. So I don't have an answer there, but certainly
I can send somebody from the committee. I don't know if anybody from the committee is on right now. I know Joe just dropped off, so I'll ask.
We do say any municipal project is a great opportunity to think about flooding and water quality improvements and do the maximum extent practicable in the project. And it can add cost, but in the long run, it's the benefits there.
Hi, this is Damon Carter. I can speak a little bit to the Dedham project downtown. They do have a bioretention area already planned for the new park that they're putting where the police station is. So this has been considered and it's being included.
Great, Damon. That's awesome to hear. Thanks for sharing that. Frank, we see your hand.
Yeah, looking at the West Roxbury side and focusing just as an example on the quarry site, which is pretty prominent there from the aerial. It's exactly. And sort of behind the quarry going, I guess, north, natural area is wooded. Some of it may belong to Roxbury Latin School. Roxbury Latin School does also have some conservation areas that are currently serving nature-based solution functions. So one thought would be to show them, and I only say that because I'm familiar with that part of it, but there may be others as well, existing natural resources in this opportunity area and potential for either expanding them by adjacent protection or by habitat enhancements, etc. It's a disturbed natural area, but there may even be a vernal pool or two in there. So it's already serving albeit perhaps degraded some NBS functions. So a map showing existing resources and places where they could be expanded might be something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely, Frank. That's a great point. And as part of, I don't want you to think we totally ignored some of the natural areas as we're going through this process. I think one part of our process is looking at existing wetlands and looking at existing water bodies. And like you said, looking at, is this a good opportunity for expansion? And just the general health of the area, because, you know, tearing down a lot of trees for some stormwater storage isn't always the best option. So balancing that expansion of some of these storage opportunities while also maintaining some of our natural wooded systems is another component that we're looking at as we go through this process. But, you know, looking at those expansion opportunities is definitely a key thing for us to look at. If we have an empty parcel, let's say there's a parcel that the town owns that the house got torn down and it's adjacent to conservation area. That's definitely a place where we could look at expanding that. And that's a really exciting opportunity for us because that's a huge area with a lot of opportunity that could be renaturalized and add in a ton of, you know, stormwater storage. So you nailed it, Frank. I think that's really important for us to look at.
There was a question in the chat asking, I think asking if we looked at sedimentation within the river itself and how that filling up of the river might cause flooding. I don't know do you guys want to take that from the modeling perspective?
Sure. So we have not looked at sedimentation of the river. So like looking at sediment transport or how much sediment appears to be built up in the channels. When we're doing the modeling, we're trying to do, you know, representation of what's the existing system is. We could, with the model, if we wanted to have an evaluation of an area to dredge or remove sediment, we could absolutely use the model to do that because we can change parameters and account for the removal of that volume and see what happens to flood mitigation. But as far as sort of pollutant perspective, that's with sediment, that's not really what we've been looking at either. So we could do it. We haven't as of yet. Did I capture everything you were thinking, Julie?
Yeah, that's great. I think the only thing I would add, basically, you know, again, if we get back to that super basic definition of flooding, it's really just too much water in the same place at the same time. And kind of what you're doing with dredging is just helping move more water. You just have more space to move water because you're, you know, having more space in the river to move it along. Most of our ideas are focused more on storing the water. So holding it in areas that aren't flooding or areas that are safe for flooding, safe to be flooded, for example, or putting it underground, storing it underground, storing it so that as the water in the river recedes, there's more room to go into it. So just adding that on. I know that wasn't exactly the question, but another question, is there an evaluation of adding channels along the river to reduce floodwaters, like in the particularly on the Providence Highway side near the island? Did we look at, well, yeah, Alex, you had that kind of great image of the overflow channel in the Barnes Park. Is that anything that might work here? Looks pretty tight for space, but is that anything, or is that something that works better in a smaller stream?
Yeah, that typically for the bypass, the volume that you would need for the actual main stem of the Charles would be pretty significant amount of area. That bypass approach does tend to work better with smaller tributaries or wetland areas. Alex, any other comments on that?
The applications I've seen successfully do this, it's, you know, a smaller channel, like Jenny said, within a park where we have open space where, you know, we can have this flow and it can come flow back in. Whereas a lot of these spaces we've been looking at are very tight and, you know, close to critical infrastructure. So balancing that public safety with some of these overflow, and then back to Jenny's point of the main stem of the Charles, that's a lot of water. So no, I agree 100% with you, Jenny. Just the smaller applications typically more successful, less kind of moving parts.
I can talk about an example from last year's work on this project. We did look at a parcel where we were next to the main stem of the Charles and ran it through the model to see what would happen, how much would it do for flood storage. And it wasn't that big of a park. I mean, it was a municipal park right next to the Charles, and we looked at creating a whole flood storage area. And it basically is a drop in the bucket when you're right next to the main channel of the river. So we did do that exercise. It was last year, I believe.
I would add also that the section of the Charles River that we're looking at is part of the flood control district, so that there are dams at Newton Upper Falls and Mother Brook that control the level of the water in the Charles in order to protect downstream areas from flooding. The whole of Cutler Park and lots of other areas in that part of the river are used for flood control already.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And again, just so inherent to this project. If you are increasing your conveyance, so moving more water faster, you do have a threat of just moving your flooding issue downstream. I will just add, I think there are a few sort of mega project examples. You know, Europe and the Netherlands comes to mind, where they have done, you know, kind of side channels, just massive, you know, massive projects where they've built, you know, additional channels that are sometimes dry, sometimes wet, to basically do what we're talking about here, improve conveyance. Because if you're a very low-lying area and you're at the very downstream area of your watershed, you know, that's your option really, is to improve conveyance. So there are a few examples of real like mega projects where those have been done. But just as Jenny was saying there, if it's not a really large project, like to be successful, it's going to be a, you know, huge capital project. And then we did get a suggestion to look at, there are some existing channels at the end of Berkeley and at Prime Auto. So we can put that in the notes. Thank you.
Prime Auto, I think, is there was a swamp across the street, and that's drainage going in from that area underneath the Route 1 over to the Charles River.
Great. And just one more comment from the chat. The area around the island to feed the dam doesn't seem to be driving water because it floods on the residential side of Dedham. Yeah. Yeah, there are definite flood impacts in this stretch. All right, we are 2 minutes over our end time. That said, we are more than happy to stay on and take more comments. I have exhausted you all with how you can, repeating myself on how you can provide comments after the meeting, but one final plug for that website link. So we will be happy to stay on, but I just want to at our official close time, say thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for the input. Thank you for your time and your interest in this. It helps us a ton. I mean, even just have folks show up and hear about the project is great. And we look forward to seeing you all on our final webinar on June 12th. And you can register for that as well via crwa.org. But since you all registered for this, you will also get an email invite. So thank you very much. But like I said, please keep sharing your ideas if you have more.
Julie, I'm going to stay on for a second and just complain because I'm in the mood to complain. Here we are, and we're all very concerned about the river. But here in Dedham, you know, Boston has that 25-foot setback. Dedham's supposed to have 200 feet, but we have too many developers who are looking at the river going, oh, we've got a building that was built here 150 years ago, so now we can just go and fill that footprint with a 4-story building and underground parking, and life is good. And we know it's going to flood out in a couple of years. And that, I think, is frustrating for those of us who live on the island, just to see developers coming through, because we're on 109 runs through here. So that's it. But the other project I think is really cool. I like that very much. Just be aware that the big gas line runs underneath that area.
What runs up in that area, did you say?
The Bob Stanley would probably be better. There's a high volume gas line.
Oh, gas line. Okay.
Runs under Gonzalez Field, and if it's breached.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that came up with the project last year too.
Yeah, and well, I'll send emails. I think this was awesome. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I speaking more just from CRWA's perspective, I won't speak for all the project partners, but we personally share your frustration that the best place, and Jenny kind of referred to this, the best time to do resilience is when you're building anyway, and honestly, sometimes that might mean not building. I don't think we're kind of there yet in our mindset, really, which is a shame, because this infrastructure that is going in is going to be here for decades, and we know what's coming, sooner rather than later.
Thinking 5 years, because he's going to have to cantilever over the river, and I don't know how you can do that in a 4-story building.
Right. So it's a frustration that you are not alone.
Have you looked at Brook Farm? Can you put more water on Brook Farm? I know you can't do it on Gethsemane Cemetery, but I think Brook Farm is 300 acres, and most of it appears to be dry. That's West Roxbury, Baker Street.
All right, we will put that in the notes.
Yes, I happen to know somebody who was involved in that, so that's a really, really good area. And so much of Riverdale here is just wet. We really can't do a whole lot about it. So we shall see. Okay, thank you all very much. I'm going to go chase my dog because she's aggravating people, and I'll talk to you all soon. Take it easy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allie. All right. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Carolina. We did run a few minutes over. Apologies, although hopefully we had you for a full 2 hours. So, all right. It's just us. All right. Great job, guys.
All right.
Was
All
yours good, Dira?
Yeah, ours was really good. We had a lot of really good folks asking technical questions and then having ideas for other sites. So
okay, good.
It's good stuff.
Excellent.
All right.
All right. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Talk
Bye.
soon.